The things I like to do is to have conversations with people. And I have conversations with folks from various walks of life. But some of the most fun and interesting conversations I get to have is to have conversations with people, just like you and I, that are running for political offices. Now, they may be local offices, they may be state assembly, state senate. As you guys have seen in the past, I've had a number of guests on going over, all the way up to candidates for the governorship here in the state of Wisconsin. And we're going to keep that series rolling here because today we have another candidate who's going to be running for the 74th Assembly District here in Wisconsin. Now, just a little back history here. We're going to use a particular term, incumbent, and it's going to be interesting because there was somebody brought this up to me last night. Are there any incumbents anymore at this point, considering the redistricting issue that has happened as a result of the liberal Wisconsin Supreme Court? So that'll be something interesting. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll use the term of incumbent. But this gentleman here, he's actually running against, well, yeah, running in the Republican primary for the 74th district. His name is Scott Harbridge. Scott, I want to welcome you on board here. How you doing tonight, sir?
Thanks, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I can't complain. I'm upright and breathing, and I'm healthy as can be.
It's about all you can ask for.
All right. Just trying to get the right set here, but yes, sir. So let's dive right on into it. So you yourself, you put in, you went out, you got signatures, and you decided that you're going to run for the Wisconsin State Assembly in what is now the 74th Assembly District. What was some of the, well, first, I guess, tell folks about yourself, your background, who you are, and then we'll get into the whys of jumping into the assembly race here.
Well, I was born and raised in Fond du Lac, went to Catholic school my whole life. When I was 20, I joined the United States Army Airborne, and I was stationed over in Italy for 2 years with the 509th Airborne, and then the second 2 years with the 82nd Airborne. And after I got out, I got married, had a stepson, my son, Joe. And so I started working for the Department of Corrections. I worked for the Department of Corrections for 26 years. I worked at a bunch of different institutions around the state. I got involved in a lot of different things with that job. We had the union at first when I started, and then was it 2010 when Scott Walker was in there, and so they got rid of the unions. And I'm not a union guy per se, but it is what we had. So I got involved with that. Yeah, yep, with Act 10. And so the union that we had was just, I don't know, it was like the old school, pretty much just do nothing union, create problems, come in and try to pretend to fix the problems and everything. So that's why I decided to get involved with the union, ran for the board. Me and some other guys took over the board at an institution in Black River Falls when we opened that up. And then I got on the bargaining teams, helped write contracts, local agreements, stuff like that. I got involved in policies and procedures, mostly because nobody else wants to do that because it's boring.
Right.
But you learn a lot when you do that. And I was we have the ERU teams with the Department of Corrections, which is like the SWAT teams, emergency response units. And so through different institutions, I've worked a lot of different positions on that. And then I was the team leader for the hostage extraction team at one institution. And so you learn a lot doing that too. And I just wasn't somebody that would sit back and just go into work every day, do your job, go home. I got involved in a lot of things. I care about the people that I work with. And so I did that. And then I retired in 2016, and I worked for a couple more years just as a limited term employee because the institutions were short staffed. And so if somebody couldn't leave work because they were short staffed, they call it getting jammed. They'd have to work, double shifts. And so
right.
If that would happen, they would call me at home and I'd, say yes or no if I wanted to come in and work that day. And I didn't really care what job I worked. I mean, I enjoyed all the different jobs and stuff. So I did that, and then I retired. And so I have 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls, 2 grandkids now. And so the final place that we ended up is up in Sawyer County after I retired, and I worked for a couple of years. Then we moved up. We had property on the Chippewa River that we'd come up on vacation. We had a camper we'd come up and stay on. And so we moved up here. We lived in our camper for a year while we built our house. And so that's kind of the
That's
history anyway.
actually one of the smarter things that I think most people could do without, sidetracking too much. When you have the ability to have some land, have a camper, live in that full time, it's amazing how much you can save up as you're building your home. It's just something that I've always been fascinated with, and something that I've seen other people do the same thing. It's just, to me, it is a fascinating thing.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing on a side note for saving money. So we have a 60 by 36 pole shed. And when I don't remember how many, Trump was in there for maybe a year or so. And everybody was telling us, oh, you're not going to be able to afford the pole shed. The metal's going to be so expensive. Trump's putting tariffs on China and you're not going to be able to
Oh
afford
yeah.
it. And so when we originally got the quote for it, and then we finalized the details and drew it up how we wanted and everything, by the time we got the final bid, it was actually cheaper than what the
Yeah.
original bid was.
I do miss those days when things were cheaper.
Yes.
Everything from raw materials, and we could certainly get into that. And I think we should get into that. But I want to keep this tied a little more specifically to the assembly race, what you're looking to do. And then, of course, local economics. And unfortunately, when we talk economics, it's not just local, it's the whole kit and caboodle from the federal side and everything that Biden's done. Just take a look at gas and grocery prices, but we'll get into that here in a minute. So, when you decided to run for the assembly district, what was your motivation for that? Because you live in an area where there is somebody who is currently running, or he is in office right now, Representative Chaz Green, I believe the first name,
Chance. It's
Chance.
Chance. Yeah.
Yep, he's a freshman representative right now, and he's running for reelection. And you weren't necessarily in his district on the onset before these maps changed.
No, it was originally was the 87th Assembly District. And of course it was almost all Sawyer County, Russ County, Taylor County, and just a little bit of Marathon County. And James Edming, everybody knows him as Jimmy Boy, was the incumbent that was in there. And I guess what really got me interested in doing it was, I think a lot of people after the 2020 election started really paying attention. And so me and my wife started working with Cause of America on election integrity issues and everything. And we started a Patriots group. And so we were having people come and speak at our Patriots groups, and we invited Jimmy Boy to come and speak. And one of his requirements to come and speak at our Patriots groups was he wanted us to take the word patriot out of it. So, of course, we didn't have him come and speak. I know it's kind of baffling
Why
to me
exactly
too.
that?
Well, through the years and stuff, and with some of the people in the Republican Party, they tell me that the Patriots groups are the ones that are dividing the party. We're the reasons why we lose elections. We're the reason why people are divided. And, we need to have a unity. We need to come together, which I agree with that. And we talk and deal with the same concerns that everybody talks and
Right.
deals with, like the economy and different things like that. We just don't always see eye to eye on all the issues and how we think we could go about solving the issues. That's all.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I'm been aware of a lot of the different patriot groups here in the state of Wisconsin, and I wouldn't put the full blame on those groups. I think there are some that have definitely stirred the pot. You could certainly lay blame some, but I think the greater degree goes to the candidate, and potentially even RPW. Because if you're not willing to reach out to groups such as, say, your own or certain other ones, then how exactly are you going to get unity? And more importantly, I don't think necessarily, and I talked to you a little bit about this yesterday, I don't think the county party system has the influence that it thinks it does. So it would behoove these folks to reach out to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as far as membership and the size, I think, like I'm in Sawyer County Republican Party. And so I've been a member for a year and a half to 2 years. And that was one of the concerns, was losing membership and stuff, and trying to get more people engaged and more people, wanting to join and become members. And that's still, a concern, and trying to get people engaged.
Right. Yeah, and it's one of the things that I've observed with that as well too is that there seems to be this idea that I think within some county party groups, it's almost like they're trying to protect their own little kingdom and not wanting to get, dare I say, outside opinion or having new people show up. It's like we need members, but we don't want you too involved just yet. That's the take I kind of take seeing here.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of like, to me, like I mentioned, being part of the union and stuff, and so the whole state union setup was, you had the state union, and then you had your local,
Right.
unions and stuff, and it was kind of the top down mentality with those unions, and you had to go with the master contract, and it's kind of the same setup, it seems, within the county parties with the RPW and stuff. And so it's some of them, it seems, kind of take their marching orders, if you want to say, from the top down and stuff. And so if you go in there with a differing opinion, sometimes it doesn't go over so well with some of the parties. And we have to be willing to discuss and talk about our differences, and come up with some solutions to things. And sometimes it's really hard to go to those venues and get your point across, because I mean, everybody has their opinions and stuff and how they think we should solve the problems, but sometimes they don't really want to hear what you have to say, it doesn't seem.
Correct. So, what was the big reason for you to want to get involved? For you mentioned that you joined the county party a year or two ago. Now you're jumping into the assembly race. Now things have shifted. You are going in for the 74th Assembly primary there. What was your big motivation?
I guess my big motivation was, I always thought I paid attention to politics and stuff, but I wasn't really involved in it so much. And it's like the Democrat Party, what they do. They say what they're going to do, and they do what they say they're going to do, whether you agree with it or not.
Mhm.
The Republican Party, to me, seemed like they just didn't have the same, I don't know if you want to call it backbone, as the Democrat Party has or not. They get a little wishy-washy, it seems, on issues and stuff. And I've been involved in a lot of different, things in the past. I've been able to bring a lot of people together through management and, through the working class people and stuff. And so I guess, like leadership abilities and things like that, I felt like I needed to get in there. They needed more people like me in there that would go up and take a stand and stand on the issues, and try to make some positive changes, and
Mhm.
not just kind of go along with the norm and the talking points, it seems.
One of the things that, when I talk to various people, either running for assembly or actually in the assembly, one of the questions that I'll often ask them is, okay, you can pass all the bills in the world that we want, but how does that fare when you have Governor Evers with his line item veto power? He's going to shoot things down. How would you respond to something like that? Because I've seen the assembly get criticized for this. Well, you're not passing bills. Well, Evers is going to shoot it down. You're passing all these bills only because Evers is going to shoot it down. And it kind of just seems like it's a catch-22 position for anybody.
Yeah, it does. And my issue is, it seems though you don't really want to address and introduce bills, and because Evers is going to shoot them down. So then it almost seems like you end up with watered down bills, or bills that Tony Evers is going to pass. It kind of happened, like, let's say, with just the remapping.
Yeah.
Um, the Supreme Court was going to come in and redraw the maps, and it was going to be terrible. So then Robin Voss said that, well, there should be an easy vote to vote for the maps that Tony Evers drew up. Well, I don't necessarily think that, you should just agree to that, because it seems like the message is always, well, it's going to be worse if we don't do this. Well, maybe you do need to introduce some bills. Maybe you need to take a stand. And if you get shot down, you get shot down. But I think some of the people would respond better and maybe get engaged and vote more if the Republican Party would take more stands, introduce legislation, even if it gets shot down, and get the votes on the books. And then that way you can see who's who and who people will actually support. And maybe, the Republican Party could gain some more traction and get some more support and get more people engaged in the process.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think it was said that that was the best of the worst options that was laid out, and as it relates to the maps that were presented to them. And
Yeah.
you see a lot of this, I think, especially on the federal level, where Republicans just a Democrat will give out a really horrible idea, case in point, Obamacare or Hillary care. Let's go further back. I mean, I'm sure you probably remember Hillary care there.
Oh, yeah.
What did Republicans do? No, we can't do that. Can't do that. Slow it down. So it just becomes an incremental thing. And then, well, like you said before, Democrats, I mean, they work year round. And what do? Obamacare. And they passed it, what, late at night, Christmas Eve, I believe it was when it actually passed
Yeah.
through. And what do Republicans do? What was the counterbalance? Instead of being the speed bump along the way, it was just, well, okay. Well, what if we just slow it down just a little bit? No, we need to be a complete stop. Or I threw this out before. Why not your big ass too? You want to do Obamacare? Fine. Carry conceal for the entire country. I mean, if they're going to go wild with it, do the same.
Yeah. And, that's the thing about, taking a stance on things and stuff. And like one of the big examples too, for me, running, I've been getting a lot of advice from people, and there's a lot of people that like to offer their advice to you too.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things is with my Christian values and morals is abortion. And,
Sure.
I am 100% pro-life. And I've been told by, good people and stuff. They're like, oh, well, you're going to have to, change your stance on that because we're going to lose elections that way. If we don't, give in and give some room and everything, we're going to lose elections. And to me, it's not about winning the election. It's about taking a stance on something and staying with it. And I think some of the times, where people get disappointed with their representatives is they'll say things when they're campaigning. And then when they get in there, then they change their stance then.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because, maybe the party tells them, well, this is how we have to look at this. This is how we have to do it. And then people are disappointed with the representation. And we need to just take a stand. We need to say what we stand for, and we need to stand on that.
I'm glad you brought that topic up because it's something Senator Ron Johnson's been talking about here. And I want to say for at least the last 2 years, where he's brought up the idea of bringing the topic of abortion to referendum to the public. There was a gentleman who actually stood up and was speaking with Senator Johnson. This was at the 6th Congressional Caucus, and I can't remember where this gentleman's from, but he was saying essentially the same thing, that, hey, we need to take a stand on this issue. And Ron Johnson's response was, well, listen, I'm the U.S. Senator for the entire state of Wisconsin. The vast majority of people aren't extreme one way or the other. They're somewhere in between. What are your, but before I ask the question, I remember him saying, it's not my job to impose my will on or my beliefs, my values on the entire population of Wisconsin. How do you respond to that? Where you're looking at your beliefs, how you see it, versus say, putting it to referendum and letting the body politic make that decision.
Well, they oppose their will through the different bills and everything that we pass on the people anyways. And I've been getting out and talking with a lot of people up here, and it's, very rural, very conservative. Yeah. The people that I've been talking with, and even some of the doors that I've knocked on that ended up being Democrat doors, they are really pro-life. And, God doesn't condone killing of babies. And So I guess that's where I take my stand on it. And
Mhm.
it's not really, to me, imposing my will. I mean, you could say you're opposing your will on the unborn children,
Oh, absolutely.
and they're people too.
That, and that's a very fascinating point right there, because if you think about this, at this point in time, and I can't believe we're actually having to have this discussion,
Yeah.
but the idea that is that being in utero, is that a person? And at what point does that constitute personhood? And I've actually heard and seen and talked to people who would make the argument that number one, it's not a person until it's born. Number two, it's not a person until it hits a certain age. And it's like, wait a minute, how far are you willing to go down this dark rabbit hole? I mean, I'm old
Yep.
enough to remember when the idea of the great compromise regarding abortion was safe, legal, and rare. The outlier versus what unfortunately seems to be the norm these days.
Yeah. It seems like it's being made just a lifestyle. Well, you decide that you got a job and a career that you care more about, just go have an abortion. And, there's other things behind the scenes with the abortion, like in Wisconsin, BioForward is
Oh,
a
yes.
company that, and they push a lot of money around, and they push a lot of money around behind the politicians so that they will, support the abortion bill because they make a lot of money off of harvesting baby body parts.
Right.
And
Between
we
that,
shouldn't be
stem
in the
cells.
business. Yep. We should not be in the business to support anything like that. And unfortunately, some of the politicians, they take the money and then they, you know, have their stance on abortion based on, who's giving them campaign donations and stuff. And that's
Right.
just wrong.
So with the abortion issue, obviously going to be being a hot topic, and it certainly was during the 22 and 23 election campaign cycles. As a matter of fact, I would say that's probably one of the reasons why Dan Kelly lost his Supreme Court race, because they made it such a hot button issue. And that was piggybacking off of the November 22 election. The Democrats are going to try to do that again, but they're also going to try to do it on every level. There was a story that just came out just yesterday. Apparently, Democrats have they have a candidate running for every state Senate seat here. They have a candidate for just about, I want to say it was 95 or 97 of the 99 Senate Assembly. No, it's not 99. They got almost 95% of candidates to run for state assembly districts. Aside from abortion, they're going to make that a talking point. What are some of the other issues do you believe that we're going to be looking into here going into this 24 election cycle, this primary cycle? And then we'll throw Trump in there too.
Well, I think one of them is I looked up. So there was a Democrat that entered the race just late in my race. Her name is Jenny Bruce. She's from Spooner. She's got a resume of being involved in, different things in politics through the years. And she was on I think, economic development things and stuff like that. And I think one of the things too is going to be like the refugee resettlement issue and all the illegal immigration and everything. And, I've had people tell me how unchristian it is that I don't, support all the illegal immigrants coming into the country. And, we need to find places for them and housing. And so I'm pretty sure that's going to be one they're going to try to hammer us on too, about how we don't care and how inhumane we are, that we don't care about all those people. But, we should be America first. We should be Wisconsin first. And we have a bunch of homeless veterans,
Absolutely.
that we should be taken care of and not taken care of. And I know how it works and how the money comes in, and then the communities end up being responsible for the refugees once they settle into your community. You can take a look in Minnesota and see
Well,
how
it
that's
becomes an
worked.
unfunded mandate.
Yep. Yep.
They
And
give you a lot of
it's
money on the
funny.
onset, right? They give you a lot
Yeah.
of money on the onset, and then once that dries up, well, it's on you and your tax base.
Yeah, and really, and then if you look at it, so people will be like, well, it's federal money that's doing it. Well, that federal money still comes out of mine in your pocket. So It isn't just federal money. It's still our money that's funding our own demise, basically.
Well, and I think the sad part is that there's a Democrat lawmaker in the assembly right now. There's two of them, and I don't have the names offhand, but they are actually proposing bills to give driver's licenses to illegal aliens so they can vote in local elections. How hard would it be, or simple, I should say? You go, how many clerks are going to actually take a look and look deep into that driver's license? Maybe in small rural areas like mine, but I would venture to say in places like Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, Oshkosh, uh, with that many people, they're not going to spend the time to look at every single license that way. I just don't see it. And then you couple all the illegal immigration. What did we get? We had migrants that were shipped over here from, there was another war torn area, and they were sent up north, but they're also talking about sending in people from Gaza here to Wisconsin now.
Yeah. I think you might be talking about people from Syria.
That's what it
It was
was.
in the Eau Claire area and stuff. And then they can go within a 100-mile radius, which, we went to the Eau Claire meetings and stuff when they were doing their presentations. And, Hayward, Wisconsin, which I'm about a half an hour south of Hayward. I'm just into Sawyer County from Russ County. Hayward is within the 100-mile radius.
Mhm.
So, and then, once they move in, they bring in their family members and stuff. And, so the small rural communities aren't safe from it either. And a lot of
Oh,
people just aren't aware of it.
well, if you look at, I believe it's Kenosha, the amount of illegals that have been settled in that area has literally changed the landscape over there. And as a result of it, crime has gone up exponentially. And I don't see how this, without assimilation, you're not going to get proper assimilation by just putting people in these refugee areas and just say, hey, stay within 100 miles. Crime can only go up. And I know somebody's going to blast me and say, well, you're saying they're all criminals? No, but with cultural barriers, language barriers, everything else like that, if it's the difference between me committing crime so my family can eat, guess what I'm doing?
Yeah. And, that's the unfortunate thing is, I would hate to see something like that happen where, we're arguing and fighting with each other enough the way it is. You get to the point where, you have to look out for your family that way and stuff. You're going to have neighbors that are going to end up turning on each other if we get to that state. And
Right.
the way they're pushing it and the way they're all coming in, it might be just a matter of time. And we might end up in that state. And so we need to do something about that too.
Well, and I think this also expands into the economic portion of it as well, too, because if you look back on just the last 4 years alone, obviously since Biden's taken over, we've seen gas prices go up, housing costs go up, the costs of all the goods that are out there. You take a look at unemployment numbers. Sure, they look great on paper, but when you look really further into it, that's not necessarily the case. Homelessness has gone up in places like Milwaukee and other places around the country, just like Milwaukee. Um, our dollar continues to be devalued because we keep spending recklessly. As somebody who's a Marine, there's always the whole joke about spending money like a drunken sailor. We've all done that, especially if you were at E1, E2, E3. But the way that this money is just being spent, what are some of the things that we can do to try to mitigate that and become, and I love that phrase you use, more Wisconsin first? I mean, even if that means getting Democrats on board with this, because they have got to know this is affecting their community too.
Yeah, so, like even just spending in general, everybody says, well, we need to lower taxes. Well, we have a spending problem in this state, and the budget went up, 11% this last year over the year before. And I mean, there's so many areas I would say of nonsense that you could go in and you could cut that budget. We spend money, well, like you said, like drunken sailors. I used to spend money like a drunken paratrooper.
There you go.
So I know how it works and stuff. And if we would get serious about spending money on things that the government should be spending money on and not on things they shouldn't be involved in. Every time the government creates a crisis and then they form committees and then they just expand the government. And the government's becoming so big and over bloated. We could cut back on a lot of regulations. We could cut back on a lot of the spending And then there would be more money actually being generated and poured back into the economy by the people because they'd have more of their own money to spend.
Hmm.
And it would benefit everybody.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned, the government growing. Just recently, they had passed a bill that reformed Wisconsin's three-tier liquor system here. Basically, for alcohol distributors and whatnot, it was a three-tier system, and basically went from the distillery to the distributor, and then to whatever the account, liquor store, restaurant, take your pick. Well, that essentially has been done away with, but they ended up creating another branch of government just for that purpose. So it's like, yeah, maybe the liquor law may need to be reformed, but did you need to create an entire branch, another branch, another department to do this? Couldn't you do it with what you had there?
Well, I think you could. And I think what you're talking about too is what resulted in the wedding barn bill.
Yep.
And, so to me, I don't feel the government need to get involved in whether wedding barns can have people, bring alcohol to the wedding barns. I mean, I think it's a great venue. And I'm sure the Tavern League was, behind a lot of that stuff and everything and pushing for that. And that's just an example of how the government gets involved in areas where they really don't need to be involved in. Then they create another crisis, expand things more, and they always seem to leave loopholes and things that now we got another crisis on our hands. So we're going to go solve that crisis too. And right now there's a lawsuit against the state of Wisconsin for that wedding barn bill. So now there's more taxpayers' money that's being wasted to, fight the lawsuit that didn't need to be.
Well, my wife brings up this question quite a bit. When speaking about lawsuits, if you look at all the lawsuits that have happened, and you can blame both parties on this because there's lawsuits being thrown left and right. The taxpayers end up paying for that.
Yeah.
I mean, just I would love to get an audit done just to see how much money is wasted. I mean, hell, if I was a lawyer, maybe I'd go hang out in Madison just so I know that, I've got constant work. And when I'm done in about 10 years, I can just go retire because I would have a huge nest egg at that point.
Yeah, I think there'd be more than enough work for you. You
No
could go there
kidding.
and you could probably be one of the worst attorneys in the world and you'd probably be very busy because there's so much going on and so many lawsuits. And I think a lot of it is it seems as though the government creates all these crises themselves. I mean, if you look at all the problems we have going on in the country, the government is basically behind all of the problems that we have. They
Absolutely.
create the problems and then they pretend to come in and fix the problems and they just keep expanding government. They keep expanding, I call it the people that control the people that control the politicians. And it
Hmm.
just grants more and more power to those people and more power to those people. And, they'll line the politicians' pockets all they want as long as the politicians give them a vote. And I don't even call it, giving them a contribution. I call it an investment.
Well, and I have heard that quite a bit where people would look at it just like that. These people are investing in politician X, Y, or Z, and they get the payout with the vote on this or this bill or that bill. Now, I don't know that for certain, so I just want to put that out there, but I've heard a lot of accusations about that. Speaking of accusations, I'm sure you have probably seen this story come out. Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Call just recently filed charges, felonious charges. That's the word I wanted to use. I like that word. Um, Felony charges against Trump lawyers,
Yep.
forgery for making their case in the 2020 election for the so-called, and I'm only going to use this word one time, fake electors. When we know that they're alternate electors, this has been something that's
Yes.
been quite a bit. Um, I think about what's going on here with this, and I see this prosecution of Trump going on in New York, Georgia, and Florida, and I see they're just trying to intimidate people. Now we got Josh Call trying to do the same thing here in Wisconsin. And what was
Yep.
Tony
He took
Evil's
a
response?
playbook from
Good.
Arizona.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like the playbook came right out of Arizona. I mean, you look at the things going on in Arizona, they did the same thing. And so a lot of the things that they do it's just intimidation, it's threats, it's lawfare, and they just want us to quit. They want us to stop. They want us to quit. And like I said, me and my wife, we're working on election integrity issues and voter fraud, and we've canvassed, a lot of addresses, and our voter rolls are so overbloated in this state. It's incredible. And, now the Wisconsin Elections Commission just spent $600,000 on the absentee ballot envelopes that are illegal. And they have them sent out, I believe, to all the clerks, and the clerks can't use them. So there's $600,000 wasted on something, that they came up with for absentee ballot envelopes and they worked on it for months. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you work on something for months and you come up with something that's illegal, and a judge put a stay on the whole thing, so they can't use them indefinitely. So, that just goes right along the lines with creating things that don't need to be created. And the voter fraud. I mean, we had the drop boxes and stuff. And then when the drop boxes were illegal, then we called it the bookmobile, driving around in Racine, the mobile drop boxes. And well, it's manned, so that's different. They just come up with any scheme they can. Right. And I've seen, and of course you have the Gableman investigation into the elections. And I don't know if you saw the footage, I think it was in 2021, where Robin Voss met with Dr. Douglas Frank. It was Michael Gableman. I think it was John Eastman, the attorney. And they met behind closed doors. And when they came out of there was 10 TV cameras waiting to question Robin Voss on what they found out. And Robin Voss admitted in front of the cameras that there's widespread voter fraud in Wisconsin, but there's nothing he can do about it.
Right.
So, and Megan Wolf, she shouldn't be there in the Wisconsin Elections Commissions anymore. The Senate ruled on that, and somehow they came up with a scheme to keep her in there. And now she's in there indefinitely, supposedly because of how the laws and the statutes are. And I don't know, it's just, to me, it seems like the elections have become so uncontrollable as far as being able to even understand everything that they're doing. And I believe it's being done on purpose, because I believe there's a lot of cheating that goes on in our elections.
One of the things that kind of really ticked me off, and this was, I'm going to say, it was 2 years ago, when they first brought in in my area, they brought in the Dominion voting machines in 22. I didn't have to deal with that in 2020. I had the old school one where you filled out your ballot, put it in the machine, then the machine would print it out side by side with yours, verified exactly who you're doing it with. I look at these machines now, and you put it in, says accepted, and that's it. No verification. Now, my understanding is there's a verification within the machine itself, but that doesn't give me any confidence. I mean, there just seems to be a lot of it's very easy to speculate that something is shady, especially when you can't get it verified.
Well, and
that's just in the beginning of that.
Right. And that's the thing, so then when you want to do like a forensic audit and stuff, and the machine companies say, well, it's all proprietary and you can't look, and they're the only ones that, can do any maintenance or do anything on the machines. You don't have access to it. Well, let's just say that even they aren't doing anything illegally, which I don't believe at all. Why wouldn't you have something that's transparent so the people have faith in their elections? Because there's a lot of people that don't believe our elections are fair anymore. And why would you just keep suppressing that? No, you just got to trust the machines, and you got to trust the small municipalities like up by us. They do a great job, but you walk in there and they know who you are. They still ask for your ID. They make you show your ID, but they've created these voting centers in the bigger cities and stuff. And I mean, they're huge. They don't know who the people are that are voting anymore. And then they have the machines. And I've learned a lot working with, Mike Lindell, Cause of America, Dr. Frank and stuff, how the machines work. And of course, at first it was, well, they're not connected to the internet. There's no way they can be connected. Well, then when it was proven that they're all connected to the internet, then it's like, well, then we have this stopgap in there, or whatever they call it, that there's no way anybody could, so it just keeps evolving into just a bunch of nonsense. And you'd sure think you'd want people to have faith in their elections, but they don't seem to care.
Speaking of not seeming to care, one of the things I noticed that people, the ones that do care, people like you and I, you got, your hardcore Democrats, your activists on both sides. Those are the people I see caring the most. What do you see for the average person? Do you see them having this level of engagement, having this level of, man, something's not right? Because when I talk to folks again, it's always goes back to the question, what does the average independent voter think? How are they? Is this all new to them, or what kind of reactions are you getting from them?
Well, we got going out and canvassing the addresses. And once you start asking people where you have a bunch of names that are registered from that certain address, like I came up, there's one of the counties, they had a nursing home and they remodeled the whole nursing home and built a new one. And they remodeled the old nursing home into all the government offices. And there was still 60 some people registered to vote at the clerk's office from that address. And it doesn't mean that those people that you can prove that they're voting, but why would you keep all these voter rolls dirty if you're not using it for
Right.
something? And you talk to people about it, and you can usually gauge when you're talking to people whether they lean left or right. And even the people that you could tell lean to the left thanked us for what we were doing, because we're actually concerned and involved in trying to keep our elections fair and stuff. And everybody's got their different levels, it seems, depending on what news they watch, what they listen to, how involved they get. I have friends that they know stuff is wrong, but they tell me I should just go fishing and not worry about it. And I can't do that. And so they don't really understand exactly what's going on and how bad things really are. They know something's wrong. Then you have people probably more like us that are a lot more engaged, get involved in things. And we know probably more things than the average people do about what's going on with our voting and stuff. And so we need to somehow, people are getting where they don't want to be involved. They don't want to know. They're so discouraged. We have people that don't want to vote now because they don't trust the voting. And somehow we need to get those people more educated and get them more engaged back into our voting, because it's a right for people to be able to vote. And it's just disappointing that people feel the way they do about it. But there's all different levels right now of understanding about it.
Well, I think people by and large have advocated their civil responsibility. Because, I
Yeah.
mean, if you think about this as Americans, yeah, when you're born into a certain area, it's like, well, I didn't ask for this. Well, you may not have asked for it, but this is the facts. You're an American. So you're in this civil social contract with your fellow Americans. So it is our responsibility to be educated. It's our responsibility to vote. It's our responsibility to run for office, to advocate at some level. But I think what's happened is we live in this society, this illusion where our confirmation bias is, well, you know what? I can go to the grocery store. There's always going to be food there. Yeah, the economy sucks, but that's quite all right. I'll just not go out later on this week. So there's that confirmation bias. And then, of course, you get busy with work and you're like, but, I really don't want to get involved with this. Man, these meetings, these town hall meetings, they're so boring. They're so dry. And then they wonder why things are happening to them. Why your property tax went up like 34%. Why did your tax go up if you live in the city of Milwaukee? How come you're not getting fireworks out there? But, the common council got what, 11% pay increase and the taxes went up there. And I think what happens is they just accept it. And
Yeah.
part of that is because I would say the Democrats are really good storytellers because they talk to emotion first. They rarely get into logic and facts. We go too far into logic and facts, and we don't. It's harder, I think, as a conservative to tell a story and entertain at the same time, so that way people remember how you make them feel. So if you can catch them in an emotional hook on the onset of your story, then you can tell them facts because they're going to remember that. So I just think that that's something we've been lacking for some time.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And to get people to feel like they do matter, and they can make a difference, and trying to get them, engaged back into the government. I mean, a lot of people just do not want to be involved or pay attention to the government. I talk about at the national level. You can turn on different news stations, and you'll get all your national news you can handle. On the state level, you have your local stations, but they don't really get into what the politics are and what's really going on down in Madison. You'd have to be watching like Wisconsin Eye or something, and
Mhm.
I mean, how many people are engaged and want to sit and go through that? Now, me and my wife we will do that, and depending on what certain bills are,
Oh
being,
yeah,
or what committees are meeting and stuff, we will sit and we will watch that, because we like to be engaged and we like to be informed. And of course, if I'm running for office, I mean, I should at least try to be on top of as much of the things as I can and find out what the concerns are of the people. And if they don't really educate themselves on that, I guess that would be part of my responsibility then, to try to educate them on what's really going on down in Madison.
correct. One of the things that I want to make is probably second to the last topic. One of the things on your campaign page, and I want to highlight your website. Obviously, we got your name down there in the ticker, but guys, make sure you check out his website here, as Scott Harbridge, our guest here tonight. He's running for Wisconsin 74th Assembly District, and that's harbridgeforassembly.com. Make sure you check that out. But you talk about building bridges. And I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more on that, because when I see people coming into, running for office, I'll give you a great example. I had an interview with Adam Steen a couple years ago. Really great conversation. And we talked about that very fact. How do you come into the assembly and build bridges with folks, especially with Republican colleagues? And ultimately, you do have to do some, working with Democrats across the aisle. So when we talk about building bridges, I was hoping you could elaborate a bit on that.
Well, it is kind of that, and trying to work across the aisle, and trying to even work with the people in your own party and stuff, because you're not going to agree on everything and stuff. And so maybe start out with where you can find some agreement on, and start working from there, and stop the fighting, stop the arguing, and let's sit down like adults and let's discuss what's going on, and let's try to come to some agreements on some things we can agree on. And then we can work from there. And it's the same way with the public. I went out door knocking and getting signatures and stuff, and I don't know what a Republican house looks like from a Democrat house. So, I didn't
Right.
always hit the right addresses and everything. And I had one gentleman that, when I told him that I was Republican, he just started screaming at me and blaming me for everything that's going on. His hands were shaking. And, he was talking about Scott Walker, and he chased all the good people out of Wisconsin. And then he says, when you let him do it. And I said, well, sir, I didn't let Scott Walker do anything and stuff. I talked to that guy for probably about 10 minutes. We started talking about some of the things that we could agree on.
Mm.
And one of the biggest things that we can agree on is we need God back into some aspects of our lives and into our government. And by the time I left his house, he shook my hand and he said, he goes, I hope you actually get in there and do something. And I had another house where this lady was telling me right away, she goes, I don't understand you people. I don't know how your brains work. I don't know how you even think. And then she told me, she goes, me and my husband, we're both retired educators from the UW-Madison system. And I know some very high intellectual people. And these are some very high intellectual thinkers. And if we could send 10 of those people to Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks, we could solve every problem we have, including global warming. So I listened to her for about 10 minutes, and I talked to her for about another 5 minutes, and we agreed on some things. And by the time I left her house, she was actually pointing to other houses and different addresses and saying, well, I think they're conservative over there. So if you go there, you might be able to get signatures from them. So I guess that's kind of the things that I'm talking about. I have a background in working in the Department of Corrections and even dealing with the inmates and stuff. You have to get them to do what you want to do. And so you have to find some common ground and some things that you can agree on and work from there. And it's not always going to be easy and be smooth, and of course, the building bridges, that was my wife/campaign manager's idea that kind of went along, with the last name and stuff. But I really, truly believe that we we got to make some changes. And, we have to get back to trying to get along better and stuff and work together on some things because we're not far from losing this country.
No, and I would agree with you, and I would agree that especially when we look at the issues that have been plaguing us here in Wisconsin, I have serious concerns about what's going to happen here, especially in light of what happened with the Supreme Court race in 23. And now over the next 2 or 3 election cycles, I have serious concerns whether we're going to retain the assembly or the Senate. So with that, I want to make this the last topic here before I let you close it out, because I'd like to get your vision. Should you win the 74th assembly, go into the general election, you win the primary, go to the general, you win the general, you're in the 74th. You are Representative Harbridge. What would be the agenda that you would like to set forth? What would be the things that you would like to bring to the table for the Wisconsin State Assembly?
Well, one of the big things is I would like to scale back the size of the government and start, talking with the people. Like I've talked to people and, I say, well, we need to repeal some of the regulations. And they're like, well, which ones? I'm like,
All of
well,
them.
you kind of, yeah. And you kind of have to get in there and you have to get out and talk with your constituents. And so one of my goals is when I'm not down in Madison, I'm going to be out and I'm going to be talking with the constituents. I'm not going to come back to my district and, not get involved and do the same things that I've been doing, because you can learn a lot from, the needs of the constituents when you're out there and you're speaking with them. And I think that needs to be more of a priority than being down in Madison and, sitting there in closed sessions and coming up with ideas and different bills to pass. Get with the people, find out what their concerns are, and get to Madison and pro some legislations. Like you said, roll back everything. And people are like, well, what spending would you cut? I'm like, I could take a yellow notepad and a pen. And in 15 minutes, if I had everything laid out in front of me that we waste money on, I could save a whole bunch of money probably in 15 minutes by getting rid of some of the nonsense that we fund. So I guess that would be more, stand with the people, representing the people, and not representing the people down in Madison that want to control the narrative and what the bills and everything that are passed. We need to get rid of a lot of the special interests, all the lobbyists and everybody that are down there in Madison. I'm not concerned with what those people's concerns are. My concerns are what the people in my district are concerned with. And those are the people that I'm going to be there to represent, not the people down in Madison, that want to compromise me and buy my vote.
Absolutely.
So I guess that would be.
Oh, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, so I guess in a nutshell, that's kind of what I would like to try to do. And I know it's probably easier said than done. I'm sure when I get down there, it's going to be an eye-opening experience, but I'm not compromisable. I'm not, I've heard of people being threatened and, you better sign on and do this and everything. I don't take well with threats either and stuff. So I feel like I'm going to be a different kind of politician than, kind of what we have going on now, because I'm an independent thinker and I have the concerns of what the needs of the people are. And that's what I plan to represent.
And I think it's important that as a representative, whether it's on a state or, in the assembly or a state senate, getting out, talking to people, not just going to county party meetings or anything like that, but actually getting engaged with just the average person. Like I would pay literally to see, and I know some people who do this actually. They actually go out to supper clubs and hang out with just whoever's out there, because that's where you're going to get the feel for what is truly your area, what is truly the people of the state of Wisconsin. And I think that kind of getting in touch is so incredibly important.
Yeah. And I say too, I tell other people that are running and stuff, I said, wouldn't it be refreshing if you would go back to your district and you go out and you're talking with people and people are actually happy to see you, and people are happy to come up with, ideas to you, instead of just going to some stuffy, town hall thing or whatever, and then having people write their questions down and then filtering through and seeing which ones you want to answer. Get out with the people and see what the people are and hang out with the people.
Yeah. And like I said, I've seen some people do that, and I'm glad that they're doing that. Just like to see more of that. Wow. Got my Alexa over here talking, just randomly. That's scary. But all right. So as we close it out here, I want to give you the last few minutes before I do a couple closing remarks. So I'm going to put myself in a smaller window way over here, and I'm going to let you have the next few minutes and just talk to the folks, tell people, well, I guess this is your elevator pitch. There it is.
All right. Well, the one thing is we need people to vote in August. We need people to vote in the primary. The turnout in the primaries really hasn't been good. August 13th, we need as many people to get out and vote as we can. And of course, November, we need people to get out and vote too, because we need to get the right people in there. And I wish people would take a look at my website. There's going to be more content and things going on there as we go. Interviews, and I'm doing more things and stuff. So it's harbridgeforassembly.com. And I guess the one last thing I like to say too, like on the abortion issue, is we need to fund adoptions and fund money for the women and resources for them, instead of funding abortion clinics. And so there's different things we can spend our money on, and that would benefit the people a whole lot more than what we're doing right now. So I hope people get more engaged. People pay more attention to what's going on in the politics. And I hope that somehow I can kind of be a conduit towards getting people more involved and, maybe make politics kind of fun again, instead of boring and, things that people just don't want to pay attention to anymore. So, and I really appreciate you giving me the time, Ed, and having me on so that I can, kind of give my voice to the people and let them know what I stand for. So I really appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
When your wife, when Stephanie had approached me with this, and we were just in a chat room, and she had mentioned it to me, I'm like, well, let's connect here. I know it was kind of difficult over the last few days with work and everything going back and forth, but I'm glad we were able to connect and get your information out. And you're always welcome to come back. We can always set something up as we get into going toward August, which will be here before we know it. So if
Yeah.
you want to come back anytime you want, just let me know. We'll set something up.
I'd appreciate that. And I'm pretty sure we'll probably be getting a hold of you again. And as things evolve and everything, there's always more things to talk about and more things happening. So yeah, I'd appreciate that. I'd be more than willing to come back and talk again with you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, Scott, thank you so much for being here, and good luck in your campaign here.
All right. Thank you, Ed.
All right, guys, that was Scott Harbridge, and I want to thank him very much for being on the show here today, because this gave us a great opportunity to look at another candidate who, when he looks, again, I encourage you guys to listen to all these interviews, but look for the people that actually have the heart of Wisconsin at the core of what they're trying to do, to look out for the people. You may not necessarily agree with them 100% on everything, but look for those folks that are out there that are trying to do things for the people. Look for the people that are out there that don't necessarily want to do things status quo. Look for that experience. Look for that background. And he's got all that listed out there on his website. So make sure you check it out. We got it right down here on the ticker, and that's harbridgeforassembly.com. Make sure you check it out. On that note, guys, I will check in with you guys next week. Thank you for joining in here. Good night. God bless you. God bless the great state of Wisconsin. I'm out.